You're listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. Join us as we explore new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. And now here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
We know we are powerful beyond what we realize, and yet we struggle to fulfill our potential. Many of us use the struggle to reinforce self-defeating patterns, old thoughts, and beliefs that keep us from tapping into the truth of who we are. We are all part of an infinite, super intelligent mind that has the capacity to create in ways we maybe can't even imagine. But our brains, that place where we think our true mind is stored, are actually just organs, no different from kidneys, hearts, lungs, or even skin. The brain is part of the body, and like the muscles you try to work out at the gym, the brain can be trained and conditioned, strengthened, and used as a master organ to create vitality, longevity, and joy. It takes self-mastery and a willingness to crack open the door to your perceived limitations to begin to use your brain better than you're using it now. Research shows that you don't have to be stuck in old stories or limitations or even pain anymore. The brain and the body remembers, and the memories are what keep us stuck. But with energy psychology techniques, like the emotional freedom techniques, we can liberate the body and the brain from the prison of our memory. We're not trapped in our brain, nor are we trapped by our biology. Our brains and our DNA are much more plastic than we think, and with healthy practices and mastery, we can begin to change not only our perceptions of who we define ourselves to be, we can literally change the DNA in our cells. Imagine this for a moment. If you release the memories that are holding you hostage to a story that leaves you playing less of a role than you deserve, you unlock the potential you've been struggling with, maybe for all your life. Not only that, you change yourself on a cellular, on a genetic level, and you pass these changes on to your children and to their children's children, and so on and so forth. What if by changing your brain, you change the world? Hi, I'm Karen Curry Parker, and welcome to Quantum Conversations. Today, I'm having a quantum conversation with Dawson Church, who is an award-winning author whose best-selling book, The Genie in Your Genes, has been hailed by reviewers as a breakthrough in our understanding of the link between emotions and genetics. He is the founder of the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare, and where they study and implement promising evidence-based psychological and medical techniques, which is really, really important. His groundbreaking research has been published in prestigious scientific journals. He's also the editor of Energy Psychology, Theory, Research, and Treatment, which is a peer-reviewed professional journal. And he shares how to apply breakthroughs of energy psychology to health and athletic performance through EFT Universe. Welcome, Dawson. I'm so excited to talk to you, and I'm excited for a lot of reasons. You don't know this about me because I don't think we've talked about this before, but I went to Gary Craig's very first EFT training in a hotel in the middle of nowhere, Flagstaff, Arizona, in 2000. And, at the time, we did not have the research base for the work that you're doing. And I am so grateful for what you are bringing to this field of energy psychology and giving people the credibility for what many of us have known works for, now almost 20 years. So welcome. Excited to have you.
Well, that's so fun to hear that, because I had no idea you'd been involved with this work for so long, Karen. And yeah, initially there was no research. And what we did have back then was clinical evidence. So we'd work with people, we'd see them shift. But what there wasn't back then was data. And now, of course, we have tons of data as well as those practical experiences. So I'm glad you were discovering those things early, and they work great.
Yes, absolutely. So you've been creating an enormous body of work that has been diving deep into not only energy psychology, but the influence of emotions and genes and the interplay between emotions and genes. In the context of what's going on in the world today, I want to talk a little bit about emotions and how people's emotions may be impacting them and what you think people can do to help manage what looks like, I mean, I try not to, I squint at my CNN news page every morning. I'm like, I have to be aware, but I'm almost like, okay, gosh, what's going to be on there this time, right? And I think it's very easy, and certainly talking to people, people are experiencing a lot of emotional energy right now. Talk to me about emotional energy, and most particularly, talk to me about that in the context of stress.
Well, all of those messages you get when you look at CNN or the BBC or the Huffington Post or any other news source are not just information, but they're producing neurochemical changes in your brain. We have a large number of neurotransmitters. We have dozens of different hormones and different flavors of hormones in our bodies. And those hormones, those neurotransmitters, are activated by what we see, what we read, but most of all by what we feel. If you have a negative thought and there's a negative emotion to accompany that, that unleashes a torrent of stress hormones in your body. So when, for example, like recently I had a friend who was attacked by a pit bull, and this pit bull took a big chunk of flesh out of her thigh. It's this terrifying experience, just out of the blue. Pit bull was standing there with its master. They were having a conversation. Then, like after 20 minutes or so of talking, suddenly the pit bull just attacked her out of the blue. So it's a terrible traumatic event. Now, what happens in events like that in our lives is we have a flood of these stress hormones, and you need those stress hormones for the fight or flight response, to evade danger, to make yourself safe. The trouble with human beings is we often then think about that bad thing or ruminate or catastrophize about that bad thing or about bad things that may never happen over and over and over again. So if she talks about the pit bull a day later, a week later, a year later, maybe 10 years later, and he still has a rise in emotion, if he still feels upset and angry and betrayed and startled, then all of the same hormones that were generated by her body during the pit bull attack are being activated by the memory of the pit bull attack. And that's what is so corrosive to our body. So if you read negative information, if you read stuff that upsets you, when those emotions are aroused, your body can't tell the difference between an emotion that's the result of a memory and an emotion that's the result of an event. And if you are regurgitating your old bad experiences, if you're dwelling on them, if you're having intrusive thoughts, if you're focusing on the bad stuff in your life, if it's popping into your mind, if you're having nightmares, if you're having flashbacks or repeated memories of the bad things that have happened, or if you're seeing the future fearfully, that same neurochemistry of stress gets activated. And the results, Karen, on the body long-term of those stress biochemicals like cortisol and adrenaline, the long-term effects on the body are severe. So it's vital to find ways of managing our stress and understanding that stress isn't just in the mind, it is in the body, and it has a terrible effect on the body long-term.
Okay, so first of all, you said the body doesn't understand the difference between an event and a memory sometimes when you have that kind of a stress response. So, to a certain degree, I want to know, how do you control the memory part? Because that seems to be the thing that comes up when I talk to people and when I'm working with my clients. There's almost this prison of memory that we sort of cage ourselves in a defensive position. How do we get out of that prison of memory in order to really, create a different reaction or a different response to what's coming at us in life?
I love that phrase you used there, the prison of memory. And that's exactly what it is. And in fact, as our brains evolved over the course of the last many hundreds of millions of years, they evolved in a way that actually was designed to reinforce that prison of memory. Because, for example, if you can just picture a distant ancestor of yours 100,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, these people living in a world full of threats, full of wild animals, full of competing tribes, full of environmental threats, the Ice Age and so on. So those people needed that strong stress response. They needed that prison of memory. If, for example, there was a snake with red and black markings, they needed to remember that that snake was poisonous. So it was extremely important, and our brains evolved to scan the horizon for anything that might hurt us and remember it. So the brain, in the phrase of my friend Rick Hansen, who wrote the book Hardwiring Happiness, he says the brain is like Velcro, sticky for negative experiences, and like Teflon for positive ones. Like if you made the mistake and you didn't notice the red and black snake and it bit you, you died. Okay, so the penalty for the failure to notice the bad stuff in life is death in terms of evolutionary history. And the failure to notice the good stuff, if your ancestor 100,000 years ago didn't notice that beautiful sunset last night, nothing bad happened. So we have this brain that's exquisitely evolved to deal and notice threats and bad stuff, and is like Teflon. I mean, the good stuff just bounces off. If you have a nice sip of wine, if you hear the children singing, if you hear a beautiful piece of music, if you look at a gorgeous flower, there's no evolutionary reason why you should pay much attention to that. But your brain is honed to pay attention to all the bad stuff. And that was fine when we were growing up in that environment full of predators and threats. Now, there aren't any red and black snakes. There aren't any tigers and lions. There aren't stampeding herds of woolly mammoths that we have to escape from. But our brains are built that way, and we keep looking for the bad stuff. And that's what is so stressful. Even in the absence of real threats to our survival, we focus on imaginary ones, we worry, we fret. We have all this biological machinery in our heads to detect threats and almost no actual physical threats to our existence. So what do? We then use all that biological machinery on imaginary threats to worry or to recap the past, and that becomes the prison in which we live. Not only that, as we think those thoughts more often, there's an amazing thing called neurogenesis. As you think a thought repeatedly, you actually strengthen the neural pathway along which that thought travels. And those neural pathways become bigger and stronger over time. In one study of twin men, in which one of the two twins had gone to Vietnam and served in combat in Vietnam. The other twin, identical twin, had not gone to Vietnam. They found that the twins who had gone to Vietnam, their brains had changed. Their brains were much more adept at carrying those signals of stress than the twins who hadn't gone to Vietnam, even though genetically these men were identical. So we do get trapped in that prison, and then more often we think that stressful thought, recall that memory, catastrophize, worry, project our fears, then the bigger and bulkier those synaptic connections in our brains become. And we literally rewire our brain over time to be even more aware of stresses than before. So it does become a prison, and it's really hard to escape from. And when you work with people and they're trying so hard, they've got all these tools, they're trying to meditate, they're trying to read books, trying to think positively, and they just can't do it because the brain, again, is evolutionarily designed to focus on the bad stuff. And so it's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you're a failure at personal growth. It's not that you're unspiritual. It's not that you are a failure at positive thinking. It's just the physiology of your body. And when you accept that, it's actually liberating because you know your brain works that way, and you then make a conscious choice to install other programming and have that other programming then start to shape your brain.
Well, it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking about, one of the things that's different between, one of the many, many things that are different between the olden days of the red and black snake is that we live longer, and that our longevity now comes from a lot of times is influenced by our capacity to be resilient during stress or with stress, and that maybe the brain needs to evolve to a place where the good sticks better because the red and black snake isn't there. And we need to be able to be resilient from stress to be able to live a long life, which is part of what you've really been diving into in the last few months with your research, is looking at longevity. So talk to me, how can I make it to 120 so that I can be a great grandma?
There was a lady in one of my live workshops, and she was so terrified because she got a genetic test, and she had the BRCA1 gene, which predisposes you to breast cancer. And so her story was, well, I'm not going to live very long. My mother died of breast cancer. My aunt died of breast cancer. I have the gene. I'm going to die of breast cancer. And people think in these terms, and they're just not true. If you look at research, first of all, it shows the body deals with about 30% of all cancers spontaneously. So without any treatment whatsoever, people recover from cancer because the body is designed to spot and destroy those cancerous cells. But when you're stressed, for example, there's an enzyme that our body uses to help it tag and remove cancerous cells. And adrenaline and cortisol, our main stress hormones, literally immobilize that enzyme. So when we're stressed, we are cutting off our body's ability to deal with cancer and those cancerous cells. Another thing that adrenaline and cortisol do, these stress hormones, is they weaken the adhesion, the adhesive bonds that hold cancer cells in place. And those cancer cells, when they aren't held into that single location in the body where the tumor is, when those adhesive bonds are loosened, they float off into other parts of the body and metastasize. And this is triggered by stress. So that's one. I mean, there are so many studies. One of my favorite ones shows that optimists live on average 8 years longer than pessimists. And so your positive thinking, your optimistic explanation for what you experience, having a positive attitude, altruism, all these things are affecting your body, not just increasing your lifespan by 6 months or a year, but cumulatively, if you're altruistic, if you're kind, if you meditate, if you de-stress yourself, if you have a good attitude, if you're compassionate toward other people, these practices, these mental activities have profound benefits on health and longevity. So it's not whether you have the gene or not, it's whether the gene is expressed or not. We have all kinds of genes that aren't expressed, that aren't turned on. And so you may have a gene that predisposes you to heart disease or Alzheimer's or cancer, but if that gene is turned off, if it's silenced, then nothing happens. It's stress, though, that is turning on all these genes. And if people don't practice positive thinking, if they don't practice meditation, if they don't tap, do EFT, do all these things that produce inner peace, then they literally are triggering this whole cascade of disease processes in their body. And they do, not only do they die much sooner, but the last years of life are much more likely to be riddled with disease. So there are powerful health and longevity arguments for applying all of these kinds of stress reduction strategies. If you don't apply them, then again, you are setting yourself up for much more disease and a much shorter lifespan.
I appreciate that so much. You have no idea. So, as a diehard optimist, and I have an 8-year-old diehard optimist, we are the diehard optimists in a family full of Eeyores. So and I keep telling my family, they're so regimented about diet and what they eat and exercise. And I'm like, if y'all don't get happy about this situation, it's not going to make a bit of difference. Eat some cake. So you have talked about, in some of the conversations that I've heard you in and that we've had, you've talked about brainwave frequencies and brainwave frequency ratios, in particular to in the context of, again, longevity and health and wellness and immunity. What exactly is, I have to know, because I think this is an interesting, we don't talk about brainwave frequency ratios a lot. What is a brainwave frequency ratio, and how do you get a good one?
In the early 1920s, a German doctor called Hans Berger discovered brainwaves. He discovered if you attach electrodes to the scalp of a person, you can get readings. And some of these readings are fast and others are slow. And the fast ones, essentially the speed of brain waves is simply the frequency at which neurons fire. And certain neurons communicate all throughout the brain by firing at certain frequencies. And these range from very slow frequencies, like once a second, once every second, those neurons, groups of neurons are firing together, to very fast frequencies, and those are like 40, 50, or even 100 times a second. And so these frequencies are divided by neuroscientists into 6 categories, from slow to fast. And so we know when we hook people up to EEGs, we know that if they're anxious or if they're nervous, they have certain frequencies of brainwave signaling. And if they're relaxed, they have other frequencies. We see the frequency, for example, of 25, 30 times a second of neural firing. And that's the normal frequency for thinking. If you're concentrating, if you're focused on a task, if you're balancing your checkbook, if you're doing math, if you're focused on work, then you're at that frequency. But if you have a lot of anxiety, then you have enormous amounts of that brainwave. And so we find that people who are anxious have lots of those high-frequency anxious-type brainwaves, and those correlate with stress hormones like cortisol. So your cortisol is high, adrenaline is high when you have those high brainwave frequencies. When you have low frequencies, and the lowest frequency is delta, and then above that there's the frequency of theta, and then alpha is your bridge frequency between conscious thinking and unconscious thinking. And so when people have lots of delta, theta, and alpha, these slow frequencies, those are associated with healing. And now, new research, which I'm looking into and writing about now, is showing that some of those slow frequencies have remarkable effects. These are the kinds of frequencies you find, for instance, when you're healing. If you go to see a healer, an energy healer, a faith healer, then we are finding, as we analyze the brain waves of those healing experiences, that both the healer and the healee are in certain kinds of frequencies. And we find that meditators, for example, are much better at evoking these frequencies than people who don't meditate. So meditation and tapping, EFT, also these two things are able to increase the number of these slow frequencies. Now, when the brain is firing at those slow frequencies, it turns out that it's having dramatic effects on the body. In one study, a certain frequency showed, and again, this research was done with mice initially. They found that passing this particular frequency through the brains of mice with Alzheimer's disease, because yes, mice get Alzheimer's too, and in fact, strains of mice and rats are bred in labs for use in experiments with Alzheimer's to look for new drugs. And so these particular strains of mice develop Alzheimer's very, very quickly. They develop these things in the brain called amyloid plaques, which are like big, gooey aggregations of tar. They're kind of like the tar on a road, or the nicotine on a cigarette. They look like that in the brain. And when there's all this goo, neurons can't fire properly. People get Alzheimer's, and they lose their cognitive abilities, eventually lose muscular control, and they die. So they have mice that are bred for use in Alzheimer's experiments. They found in one stunning piece of research that passing a certain frequency through the brains of these mice. And Karen, I get very excited, and I speak very fast sometimes. So I'm going to say this slowly because it's so.
I'm right there with you.
Okay, so this particular frequency was 40 cycles a second when they passed. This is a study done at MIT, and the researchers passed light through the brains of these Alzheimer's mice at 40 cycles per second, and these mice had a severe buildup of Alzheimer's plaques in their brains. They found that frequency cleared half of the Alzheimer's plaques in the mouse brains in 1 hour. 1 hour of stimulation at 40 cycles a second with light cleared half the Alzheimer's plaques in the brain. Now, it turns out that other frequencies have similar effects. One frequency, it's very, very slow frequency, turns out to stimulate the production of stem cells. And stem cells are your body's healing all-purpose cells. So they're like blank cells. They go to wherever the body needs them. When you get a cut in your finger, stem cells go there, and then the body shows them, the body instructs them how to make new skin cells. When your cornea on your eye is scratched, your body then sends stem cells there. They regenerate into new eye cells. So muscle cells, heart cells, all these cells are regenerating from stem cells. And so stem cells are vital for healing. And it turns out that certain slow delta waves, 1 cycle per second, stimulate your body to make more stem cells, also to send those stem cells to the places they're needed, and thirdly, to differentiate it to the cells you need for healing and repair. Those are just two of literally dozens of studies showing the effects of peace of mind, kindness, optimism, altruism, all of these peaceful states we generate when we tap, when we meditate. They're producing these radically profound shifts, first in the brain, and those brainwave frequencies are then producing these changes in the regeneration of nerve cells, muscle cells, stem cells, skin cells, and the molecules that help our cells stay young. So this is on the very leading edge of research now, and it's showing that there are all these effects that are the result of basically de-stressing your cells. That's why I say stress isn't just a mental or an emotional phenomenon. Stress is a profoundly physical phenomenon. And when you're stressed, you reverse all of these effects. When you de-stress yourself, you encourage all of these effects at the level of your cells.
Wow. That's very exciting. So, all right, so let's keep keep this really, really practical, because in my mind, I'm like, I got to go get one of those lights. But I know there's an easier way to do this. So, all right. So if you were going to sit down with someone who maybe was in a pattern of experiencing stress, what would be the top 5 lifestyle actions that they could take right now to begin to tackle their stress response and bring them more healthy brain frequency ratios?
Well, here are the things I do. And I do these things because there's research showing that all of these things are triggering epigenetic changes in your cells. So epigenetics is a science of what produces changes in gene expression. And my book, The Gene in Your Genes, is all about this. In The Gene in Your Genes, I talk about all the practices that trigger shifts in gene expression. So, for example, that cortisol, that adrenaline that triggers cancer, that is produced as a result of the action of a gene. And you can literally silence those cortisol and adrenaline genes by doing certain things. And you can trigger, not only that, you can trigger the expression, the activation of genes that code for positive hormones, like DHEA is your main anti-aging hormone. And you have more DHEA if you upregulate the genes that code for that hormone. And so the whole goal here of all these practices is to upregulate those hormones that help your body stay young, stay vibrant, and downregulate the ones that produce those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. So that's really the crucial thing that all these practices do. The ones I do myself every day, every single day, are, first of all, meditation. Meditation has absolutely remarkable health benefits. And in the link you'll give people later on in the podcast, I give you a form of meditation that I've been researching that is incredibly simple to use. Meditation, if it's too complicated, if it takes too long, if you don't feel the effects right away, people stop doing it. So with some other scientists, I've developed a form of meditation that is super easy to do. It doesn't require any mental effort. It's just some physical postures and some breathing exercises. So meditation is the first thing I believe you should do. Not only should you do it for your health, but you'll feel better if you do it. And the torrent of beneficial neurotransmitters it releases, the endorphins, the serotonin that it turns on in your brain, you just feel really, really good after doing this. So you become addicted to feel-good hormones if you meditate every day. So I really recommend that people meditate and start their day and end their day with not an hour meditation, but just 10, 15, 20 minutes of centering and meditation. So that's number one. The second one is tapping, EFT tapping. I wrote the third edition of the EFT tapping manual. It is a powerful technique. It has over 100 studies showing it is effective for anxiety, for depression, for phobias, for pain, physical symptoms, autoimmune diseases, all kinds of other conditions. So EFT tapping is simply the stimulation by tapping with your fingertips on 12 acupuncture points. And it's easy to learn, it's simple, it can be done whenever you're stressed, and we're showing in research that within just a few minutes of tapping, your cortisol drops way down, your levels of anxiety and depression reduce dramatically, physical pain goes away. Things like cravings for chocolates, sweets, unhealthy foods, those vanish with tapping. So it's a powerful technique. So the second thing I think should be in everyone's toolbox is EFT tapping. Thirdly is contact with nature, especially standing barefoot on the ground. Because if we're with the outdoors, if we're in contact with animals and trees and flowers and rocks and the earth, especially standing on the ground and being there without a layer of rubber shoes between you and the ground, literally being barefoot on the ground will help you. The earth is full of electrons, and those electrons flood up through your feet when you're standing on the ground, and that flood of electrons neutralizes free radicals, which are the main cause of aging in your body. So it has a powerful anti-aging effect to spend time in nature, especially doing it barefoot. That's a really, really good practice. Another thing that I recommend is getting in touch with your higher power. You don't have to be religious to do this. Just get in touch with the benevolent universe, get in touch with a sense of well-being. If you are religious, then use the positive pole of your religion. And the reason I say that is because many people have a religious background which encourages them to think of God or a deity as punishing. And research shows that actually will shorten your lifespan and damage your health if you believe in a punishing God. If you believe in a loving God or a loving universe, research shows that that has the opposite effect. It boosts your health. In fact, in one study of AIDS patients, whether they believed in a loving God or a punishing God was the single biggest factor in whether their AIDS got worse or their AIDS got better. So spiritual belief has a huge effect as long as it's positive, as long as it's not belief in a punishing God or punishing universe. So get in touch with a higher power, orient yourself that way every day. I know that, like for example, I lead a life vision retreat in Hawaii every year, and I encourage those people in that end of year life vision retreat, when you're visioning your life in the coming year, when you think of your future life, don't think of how your life might be and set your goals and your New Year's resolutions based on who you are now. Tune into your higher power. Tune to your higher power and ask your higher power what its vision of your life in the coming year might look like. That's far more of an elevated perspective than pulling stuff out of your conditioning, out of your past experience, out of your limited worldview at the level of your small local mind. So I really strongly recommend that people tune to that higher self, that higher power, dream from there, think from there, envision your future from there, envision your body from there, have your whole motivation, have your attunement in your molecules of your body, in the thoughts, in the expectations and anticipation of your life, all come from the vision of you that's contained in that higher power. So when you do those practices, then your whole reality picture starts to shift. Your body shifts, your mind shifts, your emotions shift. And when you do that, all kinds of wonderful things start to happen in the world around you too. So not only does your body shift, your local sense of connection shift. When you do that, when you attune to that higher power in that sense of synchrony, you're attuning to huge, large reality fields, and then you're also attuned to everyone else who's attuned to those larger reality fields. In a new book I'm working on now, I have a whole section, a whole chapter on those 6 brainwave frequencies and how those very same frequencies are also found in the energy fields surrounding the planet. They're called two kinds of frequencies. One is the Schumann frequencies. They're called the Schumann frequencies, and they also correspond to our brain waves. And the field line resonances, and there's not enough time to get into all of this stuff now, but in research, we're tracking how these huge global, planet-wide electromagnetic field patterns correlate with human brain waves. And when people are attuned, when they're meditating, when they're coherent, when they're tapping, when they're releasing their stress, then people automatically come into coherence with these enormous planet-wide frequencies. And these frequencies also are associated with growth and with longevity and with healing. And so that gives you the sense of being part of this enormous cosmic cycle of attunement and resonance with everyone else who is in coherence with those big cycles. So it's powerful to live not just as a small local being, but as part of a great universal whole. Living that way, everything starts to shift in your life, and you aren't the same person with the same perspective or the same health of the same body and mind as you were before.
Wow. So if you want to learn more about Dawson's work, his book, The Genie in Your Genes, which, being the optimist that I am in my family, was the present that I gave everybody this summer. They all rolled their eyes at me because I'm that person in the family. So The Genie in Your Genes, which is available on Amazon, and of course, the third edition of the EFT manual, which is amazing and explains everything you want to know about EFT and is a very friendly read. You can flip through it. It's got pictures. It's very easy to understand and a very, very thorough body of work in and of itself. And if you want to connect with the meditation that Dawson talked about, you can visit dawsongift.com. And is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we go?
Yeah, there are lots of resources at dawsongift.com. One is the EFT mini manual, so you can download that and tap along with that mini manual in a few minutes yourself. There's also the audio and written instructions for the meditation technique. There are links to our social projects. For example, we've now treated over 20,000 veterans with PTSD over the last 10 years through the Veteran Stress Project. That link is there. Our practitioners are there. All kinds of other resources are there. And the bottom line is these things are all means to an end. The end is to feel good. The end is to wake up in the morning feeling positive and optimistic. If you don't meditate, shift yourself, have that wonderful day, predispose yourself to a positive experience by bringing yourself into a positive state deliberately, consciously every morning. And so all of these things are designed to the means to the end of you not suffering, of you not being dragged down by those negative thoughts or those family members or people on your team or people around you who aren't supporting you. It's all part of training your brain, attuning your brain to living in a universe, a world, an emotional state of love and harmony and peace and joy and vibrance. So Karen, I'm so, as you can tell, I'm enthusiastic about this. I'm enthusiastic because I see people shift their. I was doing a live workshop last weekend, and the workshop coordinator has been doing this for a long time, and she said to me, Dawson, I've been coordinating psychological workshops for 35 years, and I have never seen people shift so much in 24 hours ever in my life. And so when they meditate, when they tap, when they learn these techniques, these layers of old emotional trauma fall away. They start to think positively, feel positively about themselves and the world and life and everything around them and reclaim their potential. We as human beings were born with so much potential. And when we were born, we knew how to love, we knew how to play, we knew how to laugh. We had all this promise ahead of us. Then over the course of our childhoods, we lose much of that. And so all of these methods are a way of letting go of those limitations we learned from family, from school, from early life disappointments, and then claiming that potential of our being. And so my big mission is seeing people release those limitations and then be the magnificent human beings that we were all meant to be. Wake up that way, go to sleep that way, and then live that way every moment in between. So the tools, we have the tools now to let go of the negative stuff and embrace the positive stuff. And so the crucial thing, the crucial message here is use those things. Meditate, tap, spend time in nature, love yourself, and then give yourself that life of peace and health.
Well said. Thank you for that. Thank you, Dawson, for joining us. And as you just heard, do yourself a favor and take away from the suffering on the planet by adding your own joy. So it's been an honor to have you here. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you again.
Bless you and your wonderful work, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. It is resistance and pain that shortens our lifespan. The prison of old memories keeps us trapped in experiences that may not be literally happening over and over again, but the energetic echoes of the past keep you stuck in resistance and constriction. For years, we thought that things like meditation and yoga were simply new age things to do, trendy lifestyle choices. Research now shows that brainwave frequencies generated during meditation, yoga, and other energetic centering activities actually lengthen telomeres, increase vitality, joy, and longevity. Thinking positive and being an optimist can lengthen your life an average of 8 years. We've spent years looking for the fountain of youth and vitality. Much like the alchemist returning home to find the treasure he seeks buried under his house, we now know that the fountain of youth is located in our brains. If we are going to change the world, we have to first start with liberating ourselves from the pain of the past. Learning to master your brain and your thinking releases a level of abundance and light that literally changes your DNA. Your DNA actually expands, leaving you ready to receive newer energies and fulfill greater potentials. When we unlock these new frequencies of energies, not only are we more vital, we live longer, have more to contribute, and we create more joy on the planet. And we need more of that. Would you like to stop resisting a life that isn't right for you? Please visit our Quantum Conversations Facebook page and get your free human design chart and report. Isn't it time you stop thinking that being who you truly are is impossible? Isn't it time you tell yourself a new story of who you are and why you are here, one that's truly worthy of you? Thank you for joining me for Quantum Conversations. I'm Karen Curry Parker, looking at a refillable glass that is always more than half full, eager to share the contents with you.
Thanks for listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. For more information, visit joyfulmission.com.